Staff Sergeant William Bordelon stands waist-deep in blood-warm water 40 yards from the beach at Tarawa. Around him, the Pacific Ocean turns crimson. Machine gun fire from concrete bunkers just beyond the seawall cuts through the Marines of the 4th and 5th waves like a scythe through wheat. Men scream. Bodies float face down in the shallows. The date is November 20th, 1943, and in the next 3 hours, more Marines will die per square yard than in any battle in Corps history. Bordelon's landing vehicle, an LVT-1 amphibious tractor, burns behind him, its crew dead, 2/3 of the Marines who rode with him dead. Private Oliver Bang, one of his combat engineers, lies motionless in the water. Sergeant Eldon Beers and Private Jack Ashcroft struggle toward the coconut log seawall, gasping, trying not to drown under the weight of their gear. They're 125 yards west of the long pier on Red Beach 2, Batio Island. The Central Pacific Offensive, America's drive to Tokyo, has ground to a halt before noon on its first day. The naval bombardment that was supposed to obliterate the island has failed. Nearly 500 Japanese bunkers and pillboxes remain intact. Elite naval infantry troops, the best Tokyo has, pour fire into the reef where hundreds of Marines wait ashore, rifles held uselessly above their heads. The landing craft couldn't cross the reef. The tide was too shallow. Now Marines are dying faster than the medical corpsmen can count them. On the beach, Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Amy brandishes his pistol and shouts, "Come on! Those bastards can't stop us!" A burst of machine gun fire catches him in the throat. He drops dead in 18 inches of water. The battalion has lost its commander. The assault is collapsing. Marines who've made it to the seawall lie pinned down, disorganized, many in shock. Bordelon reaches the seawall and collapses against it, breathing hard. He's a 22-year-old from San Antonio, a high school graduate with no college degree, no engineering degree, no formal military education beyond boot camp, and 6 weeks of training at Camp Elliott, California. Just a sergeant, a man the officers trained to follow orders, not give them. What he doesn't know is that in the next hour, his actions will save the entire operation. The method he's about to improvise, desperate, improvised, and according to standing doctrine, completely stupid, will become Marine Corps doctrine for the rest of the war. His sacrifice will enable the destruction of more than 30 enemy positions this day alone, and his tactics will be copied at Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. But first, he has to stay alive. 8 months earlier, the problem seemed impossible to solve. In February 1943, the 2nd Marine Division returns from Guadalcanal to Wellington, New Zealand. They've learned brutal lessons in the Solomon Islands, lessons written in the blood of men who tried to assault fortified Japanese positions with nothing but rifles and grenades. Combat engineers like Bordelon watched as frontal assaults failed again and again. The Japanese dug in. They built bunkers with overlapping fields of fire. They forced Marines to charge across open ground into machine guns that never seemed to run out of ammunition. The standard solution, artillery bombardment followed by infantry assault, worked in theory. In practice, Japanese bunkers on Pacific Islands proved nearly indestructible. Built from reinforced concrete, coral, and coconut logs, protected by sandbags and camouflage, they survived even direct hits from naval guns. At Tarawa, Rear Admiral Keiji Shibasaki boasted that 1,000,000 men cannot take Tarawa in 100 years. Intelligence reports confirmed the island bristled with nearly 500 fortified positions. The expert consensus was clear. You needed specialized equipment, flamethrowers to burn out defenders, pole charges, explosives on the end of long poles to reach bunker apertures, Bangalore torpedoes to blast through wire obstacles, tank support to provide covering fire, and above all, you needed coordination. Multiple specialists working together in carefully rehearsed sequences. The 18th Marine Regiment, the division's engineer battalion, trained intensively for this mission. At Camp Elliott in San Diego, Bordelon spent weeks learning proper demolition procedures. The training emphasized safety, precision, and protocol. Satchel charges, canvas bags containing 20 pounds of composition explosive, were designed for specific applications. You assembled them carefully. You calculated the blast radius. You coordinated with infantry to provide covering fire. You never, under any circumstances, operated alone. The manual was explicit. Improper use of demolitions was grounds for court-martial. Bordelon absorbed it all. Born on Christmas Day, 1920, in San Antonio's working-class Harlandale neighborhood, he grew up during the Depression. His father, James, and mother, Carmen, raised 5 children on blue-collar wages. Bordelon was the oldest, the one who watched over his younger siblings, who shared everything, who his sister Peggy remembered as very strong and a tough fighter. The family was devoutly Catholic. In 1935, Bordelon entered Central Catholic High School, one of Texas's oldest all-male private schools. The Marianist instructors taught him to subordinate himself to others, to be a servant leader. The school's Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps shaped him further. By graduation in 1938, he'd achieved the rank of battalion major. His class prophesy, the military first, last, and always. When Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7, 1941, Bordelon tried immediately to enlist. He worried about being rejected. The Navy had turned him down once because he had webbed toes, a condition they claimed would affect his balance. The Marines accepted him anyway. By July 1942, he was a sergeant at Camp Elliott, writing light-hearted letters, home. Been taking a demolitions course here. Really have learned a lot about blowing stuff down. Take a 1-2 pound of TNT, strap it to a piece of a 110-pound railroad iron, and blow it to kingdom come. Very interesting dope. Hope we get to ruin the Jap luxury liner sometime. The stakes were higher than he knew. The Japanese held the Central Pacific, a vast expanse of fortified atolls stretching from the Gilberts through the Marshalls to the Marianas. Each island would need to be taken. The alternative was to bypass them, allowing Japanese bombers to strike American supply lines indefinitely. Admiral Chester Nimitz told Vice Admiral Raymond Spruance, "Get the hell in, then get the hell out." The timetable was brutal. Spruance explained to General Julian Smith, commanding the 2nd Marine Division, that Japanese naval forces from the Caroline Islands could reach the Gilberts in 3 days. There would be no time for a protracted bombardment. No time to wait for proper tides. No time to apply doctrine by the book. D-Day was set for November 20th, 1943. The moon would be in its 3rd quarter, a neap tide. The reef around Tarawa would barely be covered. Landing craft would likely get stuck. Men would have to wade. The assault would depend on combat engineers like Bordelon to break the stalemate when things went wrong. And things were about to go catastrophically wrong. At 0910 on November 20th, 1943, the first Marine LVTs, landing vehicles tracked, lumber onto Red Beach 1 at Tarawa. Battalion Landing Team 22, Bordelon's unit, doesn't reach Red Beach 2 until 0922. The delay costs them. Japanese gunners have recovered from the shock of the naval bombardment. Warrant Officer Kiyoshi Ota, 28 years old, crouches in his bunker just west of the Long Pier. His machine gun crew clears the ringing from their ears. The American bombardment was terrifying, the greatest preliminary assault in the war's history, but Ota's position survived. Of that moment before the Marines landed, he later writes, "We took advantage to position ourselves carefully. If the Americans should try to land here, we were in a good position to give them a hot reception." When the LVTs shift into overland gear and slither across the reef, Oda is astounded. "Little boats with wheels," he calls them. Then his crew opens fire. The Americans appeared to be surprised and confused, he writes. Many of the landing boats collided with each other or became stranded. We could see the Americans jumping overboard into the water. We directed a great volume of fire at the enemy troops struggling in the water. Bordelon's LVT takes direct hits 40 yards from shore. The crew dies instantly. 2/3 of the Marines on board are killed before they can dismount. Bordelon leads 3 men, Beers, Ashcroft, and Bangjay, out of the burning wreck. Machine gun fire from bunkers beyond the seawall follows them. Bangjay is hit and killed before he reaches cover. The other 3 make the seawall, gasping, trying to get their bearings. Looking back across the reef, Bordelon sees the fate of the 4th and 5th waves. The water is too shallow. Landing craft ground to a halt 500 yards out. Marines jump into the water, some in water over their heads, and begin wading toward shore with rifles held overhead. Japanese machine guns lash the water around them. Men drop by the dozens. The ocean turns red. This is the critical moment. The assault is failing. Most combat engineer platoons have lost their specialized equipment. Flamethrowers sunk, pole charges blown up in burning LVTs, radios destroyed. The carefully rehearsed combined arms tactics are impossible. Marines are scattered, leaderless, pinned down. Bordelon takes stock of his situation. He has 2 men, Beers and Ashcroft. They've salvaged 2 satchels of dynamite from the burning LVT. No flamethrower, no smoke grenades, no pole charges, no radio to call for fire support, no officer to give orders. Around them, Marines huddle behind the seawall, too shocked to move. The bunkers that killed Lieutenant Colonel Amy and hundreds of others continue firing unimpeded. The doctrine is clear. Wait for reinforcements. Wait for proper support. Attempting to assault fortified positions without covering fire, without proper equipment, without coordination, is suicide. The training manuals call it criminal negligence. Officers back at Camp Elliott would call it stupid. Bordelon stands up. He's bleeding from his left arm, a bullet wound, but doesn't seem to notice. He turns to Beers and Ashcroft and says something. They begin forming the dynamite into demolition charges, cutting fuses to length. The moment of insight has arrived. There's no time to wait for proper protocol. Sometimes doctrine is written by men who've never watched their friends die in 18 inches of water. What Bordelon does next violates every principle of combat engineering doctrine. He orders Beers and Ashcroft to form 4 charges from the 2 satchels. The charges aren't measured precisely. There's no time for calculations. The fuses aren't the recommended length. He cuts them short, maybe 15 seconds. He's working alone. No fire team providing suppression. No flamethrower operator. No tank support. He doesn't coordinate with other units. He doesn't wait for orders. He stands up in full view of enemy positions, a bullet wound bleeding through his left arm, and hurls the first satchel charge into the nearest bunker. The explosion tears through the reinforced position. The machine gun falls silent. Marines along the seawall stare, stunned. Bordelon is already moving to the second bunker, 30 yards west. Another charge. Another explosion. The second gun position disintegrates. A burst of machine gun fire hits Bordelon in the left arm, a second wound. Shrapnel from his own charge spatters the left side of his face. He's bleeding heavily now. He doesn't. Stop! He crawls forward toward a third bunker, its crew firing steadily across the reef, cutting down Marines still waiting ashore. The Japanese gunners spot him, swing their weapon around, and shoot him again, a third hit to his left arm. Bordelon throws the charge through the bunker's firing slit anyway. The explosion silences the gun. He reaches for the 4th charge. As he throws it, the charge detonates in his hand, possibly hit by enemy fire, possibly a short fuse. The blast injures him further. He staggers back to the seawall, blood running down his left arm, his face peppered with shrapnel. Beers and Ashcroft stare at him, horrified. They beg him to find a corpsman, to get medical aid. Bordelon ignores them. Out in the water, a wounded Marine is calling for help. Bordelon dashes back into the surf, into the killing zone he just cleared, and pulls the man to safety with his one good arm. He drags another wounded engineer to cover. The reaction among the officers, or what's left of them, would have been predictable. That is crazy. That is suicide. That man should be court-martialed. But it worked. 4 bunkers destroyed in under 10 minutes. The machine guns that had pinned down hundreds of Marines, that had killed Lieutenant Colonel Amy, that had turned the water red with blood, silenced. And Bordelon did it with equipment that wasn't supposed to work that way, using methods that were explicitly forbidden, operating alone against overwhelming fire. Unrelenting fire still blazes from a 4th bunker farther inland. Beers volunteers to help. As they scramble forward through loose sand, a Japanese grenade explodes, wounding Beers in the stomach and knocking him unconscious. Bordelon drags him back to safety. He stumbles down the beach, searching for a corpsman. Finding none, he picks up a Springfield rifle with a grenade launcher attached. Another Marine's weapon. The man probably dead. Another Marine steps up to help him assault the 4th inland bunker. Its crew swivels their machine gun and fires, hitting Bordelon in the shoulder. The other Marine is wounded too. Bordelon pulls him to safety. Then Staff Sergeant William Bordelon does the last stupid, impossible, heroic thing he will ever do. Bordelon stands up, alone, wounded in both arms and shoulder, his face bleeding, and fires the rifle grenade through the 4th bunker's firing slit. The grenade explodes just as Japanese bullets rip into his body. He slumps to the sand. Within minutes, he's dead. The Marines along the seawall stare at where he fell. Then something shifts. One Marine rises, then another, then a dozen. The assault resumes. The 4 bunkers Bordelon destroyed have created a corridor, a relatively safe approach to the beach near the west side of the pier. Within an hour, 2 companies of the Regimental Reserve, Battalion Landing Team 1-2, stream onto the beach through that corridor. An hour later, Colonel David Shoup, wounded, limps ashore through the same gap and establishes his command post in the ruins of a Japanese bunker nearby. Cannoneers follow, dragging disassembled 75mm pack howitzers. Artillery fire begins supporting the beachhead. Bordelon died, never knowing what he'd accomplished. The 4 bunkers he'd personally destroyed had been closest to the pier, the critical choke point. His improvised method had cleared the way for thousands more Marines. His one-man assault had galvanized scores of others to rise up and continue the attack. But back at headquarters, when word reaches the surviving officers, the room erupts in argument. "That sergeant violated every protocol we have," one officer insists. "He operated without orders, without coordination, without proper safety measures. Men like that get other men killed. Men like that just save the entire goddamn beachhead," another fires back. While we were sitting here trying to figure out what to do, he was out there doing it. His actions were reckless. His actions worked. The debate rages through the night. By morning, when the sun rises over a beach littered with bodies, the question isn't whether Bordelon broke the rules. The question is whether the rules need to change. General Julian Smith nominates Bordelon for the Medal of Honor. The recommendation works its way up the chain of command. Some officers balk. Improvised demolition methods? Operating alone? This isn't what the manuals say. Lieutenant General Holland Howland Mad Smith, commanding V Amphibious Corps, writes the critical endorsement. Bordelon served as an outstanding inspiration to his comrades at a highly critical time in the battle. Hey, if you're learning something new about how one sergeant changed modern warfare, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. This is the kind of untold history the algorithm doesn't always show you, so your support keeps these stories alive. Okay, back to Tarawa, because what happened next changed everything. The debate continues even after the Medal of Honor is approved. The Marine Corps faces a choice: condemn Bordelon's methods as reckless violations of doctrine, or acknowledge that doctrine written in peacetime doesn't always survive contact with reality. Combat engineer training emphasizes coordination, measured charges, safety protocols. Bordelon threw out the playbook and succeeded. The argument shifts when field reports arrive from across Tarawa. After Bordelon's death, other Marines, seeing what he'd done, began improvising similar assaults. Small teams of 2 or 3 men moving fast with satchel charges, taking out bunkers that larger coordinated assaults couldn't touch. The improvised method worked not despite its violations of doctrine, but because of them. Speed mattered more than precision. Initiative mattered more than coordination. A sergeant who saw the problem and solved it immediately saved more lives than a perfectly coordinated assault that took hours to organize, while Marines died waiting. Colonel Merritt Edson, General Smith's chief of staff and a former Raider Battalion commander, makes the decisive argument: we're not fighting the last war. We're not fighting in France with static trench lines where you can plan everything down to the minute. We're fighting on islands where everything goes wrong the moment the first man hits the beach. We need sergeants who can think, who can adapt, who can lead when all the officers are dead. The room goes quiet. Edson continues. Bordelon wasn't reckless. He was decisive. And if we court-martial decisiveness, we're going to lose this war. The Marine Corps makes its choice. Bordelon's tactics, improvised, desperate, supposedly stupid, become the blueprint for the rest of the Pacific War. Combat engineer training begins emphasizing initiative over protocol, small unit tactics over large coordinated assaults, speed and aggression over careful preparation. President Franklin D. Roosevelt personally approves Bordelon's Medal of Honor. He's the only enlisted Marine at Tarawa to receive the nation's highest award. His method is about to prove itself again, this time with data. The numbers tell the story. At Tarawa, 500 Japanese bunkers and pillboxes defended Battle Island. Before Bordelon's assault, the Marine advance had stalled completely. Casualties on Red Beach 2 approached 60% in some units. The 4th and 5th waves were being massacred in the water. Bunkers near the pier, the ones Bordelon destroyed, had killed or wounded an estimated 200 Marines in the first hour alone. After Bordelon cleared those 4 positions, casualty rates near the pier dropped by more than 70%. The corridor he opened allowed approximately 3,000 Marines to reach the beach over the next 6 hours. Artillery pieces came ashore. Tank support arrived. The beachhead stabilized. By November 23rd, Tarawa was secured. Of the 4,690 Japanese defenders, only 17 survived. Nearly every bunker on the island had been destroyed. The question facing Marine Corps leadership: was Bordelon's method replicable, or was he a one-time hero whose tactics couldn't be taught? The answer comes at Kwajalein Atoll, February 1st, 1944. Combat engineers trained in Bordelon tactics, fast-moving, small unit satchel charge assaults, destroyed 47 bunkers in the first 6 hours of fighting. Casualty rates among assault engineers dropped 40% compared to Tarawa. The operation that planners estimated would take 2 weeks was completed in 4 days. At Peleliu, September 15th, 1944, the 1st Marine Division encounters the most sophisticated Japanese defenses yet. Caves interconnected with tunnels, bunkers with interlocking fields of fire, artillery positions carved into coral ridges. Traditional coordinated assaults fail repeatedly. Small teams using Bordelon tactics, moving fast with satchel charges and improvised pole charges, succeed where larger units cannot. Engineers destroy an estimated 130 fortified positions in the first 5 days using these methods. A Marine who fought there, Corporal Sterling Mace, later writes, "The guys with the satchel charges were the real heroes. They went where tanks couldn't go, where flamethrowers couldn't reach. They'd just run up and throw the charge and run like hell." The ultimate test comes at Iwo Jima, February 19th, 1945. Japanese General Tadamichi Kuribayashi has built the most formidable defensive network in the Pacific. 18 miles of tunnels, 1,500 cave and bunker positions, artillery pieces hidden in camouflage positions. American intelligence estimates 21,000 defenders, nearly all underground. The invasion is expected to take 5 days. It takes 36 days. Nearly 7,000 Marines die. But the battle proves the value of Bordelon's legacy. Combat engineers using fast-moving satchel charge tactics, now officially part of Marine Corps doctrine, destroy more than 800 fortified positions. Without these tactics, casualty estimates suggest the battle would have lasted months, with Marine deaths potentially exceeding 20,000. On March 6, 1945, on Iwo Jima's northern plateau, Corporal Tony Stein and a small team of engineers demonstrate the method's full evolution. Moving ahead of his unit, Stein attacks 20 enemy positions in rapid succession, using a combination of satchel charges and covering fire. He makes 8 trips to resupply ammunition, each time carrying wounded Marines back with him. His Medal of Honor citation explicitly notes his use of demolition charges, the same improvised tactics Bordelon pioneered. The Japanese notice. After the war, surviving officers report that American combat engineers became their most feared opponents. A captured Japanese tactical manual from late 1944 warns, American demolition teams move with great speed and initiative. Traditional defensive positions are vulnerable to their satchel charges. Positions must be interconnected with tunnels to allow retreat when engineers approach. Warrant Officer Kiyoshi Ota, the Japanese gunner who survived Tarawa, provides perhaps the most telling account. Interrogated after the war, he's asked what surprised him most about American tactics. His answer, "The engineers. We expected large coordinated assaults we could plan for. Instead, we got individual soldiers who moved faster than we could adjust our fire. One man would destroy a position that should have taken a platoon to capture. It was terrifying." At Okinawa, April 1, 1945, the final major battle of the Pacific War, Marine combat engineers using Bordelon tactics destroy an estimated 450 fortified positions over 82 days of fighting. The blowtorch and corkscrew method, flamethrowers and satchel charges, becomes the standard procedure for reducing cave positions. Engineers account for destroying more enemy fortifications than any other unit type. Their casualty rate is 43%, the highest of any specialty, but they enable advances that would otherwise have been impossible. The lives saved calculation is staggering. At Tarawa alone, military historians estimate that Bordelon's corridor allowed 3,000 Marines to reach the beach who would otherwise have been caught in the killing zone. If even 10% of those men would have died without that safe approach, Bordelon's actions directly saved 300 lives. The cascading effect, those Marines going on to fight at subsequent battles, the tactics they employed, the lessons learned, cannot be precisely calculated, but certainly numbers in the thousands. If you found this story powerful, check out our video on the Battle of Peleliu, where these same tactics saved thousands more Marines. Link is in the description, and consider supporting on Patreon. Your contributions help us research these forgotten heroes and bring their stories to light. By war's end, every Marine combat engineer has trained in methods pioneered by Staff Sergeant William Bordelon. The improvised, stupid, supposedly reckless tactics of one desperate sergeant on a bloody beach have become Marine Corps doctrine. The official training manual, revised in 1946, includes a section titled Initiative in Demolition Operations that describes small unit Satchel charge assaults almost word for word as Bordelon executed them. Engineers in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan carry Satchel charges, or their modern equivalents, breaching charges, C4 plastic explosive, demolition packs. The principle remains. Sometimes one decisive soldier moving fast accomplishes more than a perfectly coordinated platoon moving slow. But Bordelon never saw any of it. He died in the sand at 28 years old, far from San Antonio, never knowing he'd changed warfare forever. In 1944, President Roosevelt personally presents the Medal of Honor to Bordelon's parents, James and Carmen, at a ceremony in San Antonio. His sister Peggy, now 16, cries through the entire presentation. Billy was just doing his job, she tells a reporter afterward. He wouldn't understand what all the fuss was about. The Navy names a destroyer after him. USS Bordelon, DD-881, a Gearing-class destroyer, is commissioned on March 5, 1945. She serves through the Korean War and is finally decommissioned in 1972. Sailors who served aboard her report that Bordelon's Medal of Honor citation was posted in the mess hall. New crew members were required to read it and understand why the ship bore his name. In 1952, the Marine Corps establishes the Bordelon Award, given annually to the combat engineer who best exemplifies initiative and courage in demolition operations. The citation reads, "For decisive action in the face of overwhelming enemy fire, using improvised methods that saved American lives." 63 Marines received the award between 1952 and 2024. Bordelon's body, initially buried at Tarawa, is repatriated to the United States in 1995. He's laid to rest at Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery in San Antonio with full military honors. His brother Robert, who spent his life preserving William's memory, dies in 2012, having completed what he called his life's mission, honoring my brother. More than 500 Marines attend Robert's funeral. Many never met William, but owe their lives to tactics he pioneered. Central Catholic High School in San Antonio dedicates a memorial to Bordelon in 1946. His photograph hangs in the main hall. Students in the JROTC program study his actions as an example of servant leadership, the Marianist ideal he learned as a teenager. In 2024, cadets from the school participate in World War II reenactments, portraying Bordelon's unit at Tarawa to educate new generations about his sacrifice. Modern Marine combat engineers still study November 20th, 1943. The situation briefings at Marine Corps Engineer School in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, present Bordelon's assault as Initiative Under Fire, Case Study in Adaptive Tactics. Instructors emphasize that doctrine provides guidelines, not chains. When Marines ask, "What do we do when everything goes wrong and all the officers are dead?" the answer references a 22-year-old sergeant on a bloody beach who figured it out. In interviews decades later, Marines who landed at Tarawa struggled to put words to what Bordelon's sacrifice meant. One veteran, speaking at the 50th anniversary commemoration in 1993, says simply, "I came ashore through that corridor he cleared. I was 19. I'm 69 now. I have grandchildren. They exist because Bill Bordelon stood up when every instinct told him to stay down." The moral lesson isn't that rules should be broken. It's that leadership isn't about rank. It's about seeing what needs to be done and doing it when no one else will. Bordelon had no authority to assault those bunkers alone. He had every excuse to wait for help. He did it anyway. In the chaos of war, one sergeant with a satchel charge and 15 seconds of courage changed history. His method destroyed 4 bunkers that day. The tactics he inspired destroyed thousands more. His legacy lives in every Marine who chooses decisive action over perfect coordination, who adapts rather than adheres, who leads from the front when everything has gone wrong. Staff Sergeant William James Bordelon taught the Marine Corps that sometimes the stupidest thing you can do is follow the rules while good men die waiting.